really, at the end of the day, it's just a matter of a macro market. It's just what happens.
That's why it's really important to have a plan. Have a plan and understand what your goals are.
In fact, my camel out there is suffering right now with a broken back.
So I actually found Pepe when it was only a couple of hours old, and I'm like, oh, this is a funny meme.
Oh my god.
Yo! Who is this DJ?
The old man is swing trading over years at a time. And it's like, that's where the real money is made.
The answer is impermanent loss. With single-sided staking, you don't have to worry about impermanent loss.
If you're aware, if you're disciplined, you can hone that into further financial growth.
Financial freedom, to where you can actually live life and not have to be constantly living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, more or less,
Information
right?
provided by the DGen Roundtable is for general information purposes only. All information make no representation or warranty of any kind expressed or implied regarding the accuracy, adequacy, validity, reliability, or availability and completeness of any information. I fucked that up. Take us away, Zenith.
No worries. That was our disclaimer man, Mr. Will Stevenson himself. But welcome back to the book club presented by DGen Roundtable. So hello and good evening to all ladies, gentlemen, and DGens of all ages out there. We're happy to have you join us on this lovely Friday evening, which is also a very busy Friday, if I might add, because there's a lot of stuff going on in our world and the crypto world in general. By the way, the Pulse Chain Conference is going on right now, being put on by our good friend Matty Allen, who was on our show on Wednesday. We had a great time talking with him. So when you're done here, either go check out Discord Syndicate, where more of our friends over there are launching a protocol, or check out the Pulse Chain Conference later on, because at midnight Eastern time, you're probably going to see a lot of our beautiful faces on there as we run our own panel with RG3 and Axis. So with that being said, welcome to the show. Where's my book? By the way, this episode goes out to Bradley, who I am currently having a bit of a love-hate relationship with after this one, because it was a good read, but boy, was I not ready for this. I was not ready for this masterclass in domestic and foreign relations and the intricacies of how that works in combination with cycle theory. Dear God, she thick. And it's not double-spaced. My God. Anyways, I am joined by the usual suspects tonight. We got my co-host for the evening, the Ascending Man himself, Mr. Nate McGettit. How's it going, brother?
It's going all right, going all right. You know, it was a beautiful day today, so I got outside a lot, especially since my work is outside. But yeah, no, I love Ray Dalio, man. I'm a big fan of his, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts where he literally just keeps repeating the same thing over and over and over that he talks about in this book. So yeah, and it's fascinating, the whole cycles and all that he talks about is it's very interesting. I'm a huge fan, so yeah, when we start doing this book, I'm listening to it and I'm like, yeah, I already know this because he talks about this like constantly over and over and over again. So, but yeah. Hey, Will, how are you doing today? I steal your co-host spot.
I am doing fantastic. You did steal my co-host spot, but you also know a lot more about good old Ray than I do. I listened to the 45-minute animated YouTube version that Mr. Battle-Hardened Sniper was so kind enough to put up for all of us. So that gave me a pretty good idea. I listened to it twice. So I got a pretty good idea of the general overview of the book. I looked at that thing that Zenith held up and I was like, that looks like a lot of reading. And I think the Audible version was 16 hours and I had 8 hours today to listen. So I opted to instead listen to the YouTube version. So I'm doing quite good though, as far as things are going. The market's going.
Oh yeah, this is my kind of book as well, Will. You probably made a good choice by watching the video because it is dense. Charts, numbers, graphs, all that stuff is in there.
It's a really good video, and shout out to Ray Dalio. He did the voice. It was well produced. They had a great team of animators, lots of good sound effects and stuff. So I highly recommend everyone go and listen to the audio, not the audio, the animated version that's on Ray Dalio's channel. So definitely go do that. I'll drop the link in the description below. But Farmer Jay, how you doing, bro? What's new and exciting with you?
I'm doing quite good. Not much new with me, but it was a very interesting read or listen. I only got about halfway through the book. I did listen to the 45-minute version beforehand, before I did the I think on YouTube it's split into two parts. There's an 8-hour part and a 6-hour part. So I only got done through the 8-hour part, but I did listen through the 45 minutes. So it's a pretty intense book. I think this is actually a book we should have broken down in two parts. It's quite intense.
Farmer, you're not wrong. Had I known better going into this one, this is a book I probably would have tried to cover in sections like we do with Sci-Vive. This book kind of goes into the category similar to The Sovereign Individual for me, where it's like these are very dense and very information-packed books, and it covers a lot of concepts. So I'm not going to call the rest of our financial books that we read a little fluffier, but they are. All right, that being said, we got Sam joined by Mr. Pumpkin on a drive to Washington. What's going on, man?
That is correct. I'm heading up to Washington. I'm going to go convert somebody's garage into an additional dwelling unit, finish it up, and have a good time just building stuff and sharing it with the world. But, man, this book was – I started with the summary video, and, boy, am I glad I did, because that put it – like it framed the reference of listening to the audiobook. And there's so much more information in the audiobook. And I have to say, my takeaway from this whole thing is, boy, howdy, am I going to start buying land in China. That's where I'm going to go build all my next bungalows. That's all I've got.
Before you do that, you might want to ask our rich dad, Robert Kiyosaki, about purchasing gold mines in China and how that went for him. Fun fact, the CCP seized it and then said, "What gold mine? You never owned a gold mine." And then he looked at them and said, "Yep. Can't do anything about that."
They busted a Debo. They said, "What gold mines, fool?"
Pretty much. Alrighty. And last but not least, we have Mrs. Producer herself, Mrs. McGettit, with the new logo as well. How's it going?
Hello. Yeah, it's going good. It took me an hour to modify this thing, just so you know. It was a pain in the butt. But I wanted to make it pink because the normal blue one is like you see it all the time. And I also wanted to do something a little more girly because, I don't know, I'm lame, I guess. So
that's not lame at all. It looks good.
Thank you. But no, new logo. I'm happy to have one finally because I've been needing to do that for a while and I just kept forgetting about it. I did similar to what Farmer J did, actually. Basically the exact same thing. I did the full 8-hour YouTube video on double speed. Listen to that. And then that little 45-minute quip as well. So unfortunately, didn't get all the info, but with a 16-hour audiobook, and I think we didn't pick the book till like Tuesday or Wednesday. I kind of figured I wasn't going to get it done.
I thought I said it on Monday, but okay.
I think it was still like in the suggestion point. I don't remember for sure. I may not have seen your message either until then, but you know. Either way, I didn't start right away in the week, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, fair enough. Tell you what, we were going to start our lovely discussion by a fun little exercise. I want each of you guys to come up with a poorly described one-sentence version of the book. And while you think about that, I am going to go ahead and hit chats to give you guys a sec to come up with a poor description of this book. First up, we have good friend of the channel, Centurion54X. He says, "Good afternoon, DGen. Good book to listen to this week. Do you have any book recommendations for learning about the Federal Reserve?"
I got this,
I
bro.
do not. Hit it.
End
Take
the
it
Fed.
away.
End the Fed by Ron Paul. He's a famous libertarian out of Texas. He ran for president a long time ago. He started the Ron Paul School of Education. He's a very intelligent, well-spoken man who knows a lot of things about liberty and things like that. So if you want to learn about the Federal Reserve, then End the Fed by Ron Paul. Now, as you can probably tell by the title, he might not like the Fed so much himself. So take that with a grain of salt. But the information in there is quite good. I highly recommend that book.
I am actually going to hit you with a super nerdy recommendation. However, the correct answer for this one, in my opinion, is the Federalist Papers. Because in a few of the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, I believe it is Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton who are writing back and forth to each other under pen names in their local newspapers. One of the issues that they talk about in the many Federalist Papers is the idea of a centralized bank. One of the things that they compare it to is the centralized bank of England at the time, which obviously these are some of the founding fathers. So they just fought the Revolutionary War and are trying to build the country at this point. So they're trying to figure out how to get money going. And if you remember from history class, the Articles of Confederation, one of the notable complaints that the states had about it was that it didn't really solve the monetary issue, which is that the federal government didn't exist at a point in that time where it was able to mint coinage. And a lot of the states were actually trying to figure out, do we make our own coins? Do we use other people's? What do we do here? So Alexander Hamilton was a big proponent for the Federal Reserve. Thomas Jefferson was a big proponent against the Federal Reserve. Also, I'm pretty sure Andrew Jackson, another one of the presidents later on, I think some of his last dying words was, "I want people to remember that I killed the bank." He was very much against it. So this has been the Federal Reserve debate has been going on in American history for a hot minute. I'll just say that much.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and completely end it. However, this book alone actually is pretty good at teaching you kind of like how the Fed works and all that in the economy.
I'm not going to say it'll teach you how the Fed works, but it'll definitely tell you about the effects. It'll tell you like what the Fed, like what can you see in the markets as a result of the Fed. All right. Two more comments before we get through. We got Tam. She says, "Hey fam, our #1 cheerleader is here. Thank you for hanging out with us. I know there are some, actually kind of surprised you're here because I thought SJ and Axis are streaming right now and you are part of Axis gang, if I'm not mistaken. So we appreciate you showing up and hanging out with us as always. And then last but not least, we have one of our very own, Agent J. He says, howdy. Good to see you, brother. We let us know if you're coming on stream tonight to hang out with RG3 and Axis. We'd love to have you if possible. But other than that, let's get back to my question. All right, Nate, can you poorly describe this book in a quick quip?
Yeah, so poorly describe it. So sometimes things go up, sometimes things go down. It tends to happen over the course of like hundreds of years. And so little ant-like human beings such as us don't really see what's actually going on. Yeah, you can build your generational wealth that way.
Very nice. Will, what you got?
I got that this book is good for leveling out uneven tables, as well as teaching people that empires rise and fall in like couple 100-year cycles based on reserve currency.
Like it. Farmer J, what you got?
Well, first of all, it's got to be one uneven table for that book to level out. That's quite a bit. What I got out of it, well, you said a kind of bootleg description of what it is.
Yeah.
Kind of history isn't new. It's just things are just destined to happen over and over again, and most people that don't pay attention to it are victim to it, and the people that can actually pay attention are able to capitalize on these opportunities that present themselves over and over again in history.
You know what's fascinating? Just real quick, what's fascinating is that history is probably the best rapper of all time because it's the best. It's best at rhyming. I'll show myself out of the door now.
I give it a chuckle.
All right, Sam, what you got?
Well, if I had to summarize it, I would say when everybody else is buying on leverage, you probably shouldn't. That's what I'll say.
That's a good way of putting it. I like that. And Mrs. Producer, what do you got?
I would say printing money to solve your money problems. Not a good idea. Abort mission. Do not pass go.
Fair enough. I would say man spends 500 pages discussing the price of tea in China over the course of 2,000 years.
Yeah. What does that got to do with the price of tea in China? Very clever.
This book.
Very clever, Zenith.
I know that's one of your isms, Will, so I threw it at you.
Yeah. What does that got to do? Very good.
Alrighty. With that said, let's get into this. I'm going to do a quick, fastest 5 minutes in book review, and then after that, we're going to talk about some of the main points. The main points I want to talk about tonight are the 3 cycles that this book talks about. This book tries to describe how the world moves in 3 different cycles, and when they line up together, that is when you see large, momentous shifts in what is going on. So to start off, the book is kind of divided into 3 sections. The first one is talking about concepts. It's talking about all the different cycles that Ray Dalio is examining in this one and how he examines it. Pretty much uses a lot of historical records and then built an algorithm to examine all these things and determine when you get indicators about things are going to happen in the world. The title of the book is Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. So the focus on this book is when the world order changes. If you look at some of the historical context in the principles section, he shows that over the ages, there's pretty much been a singular nation, and for about like 200 to 300 years at a time, maybe even 500 at points, the world kind of exists in a unipolar state. What I mean by that is that a singular nation is leading the charge or leading the world in terms of business, economy, military might, political, cultural, all that kind of stuff. So what this book focuses on is just trying to understand how these tides kind of come and go and when the cycles change, and what are the causes and the indicators that you can see to determine when the world order is changing or when there's going to be a new world order. That is one of the topics that he talks about a lot. So the main three cycles that I mentioned previously, we have the long-term debt and capital markets cycle. This is where you actually, this book focuses primarily on the last 500 years of history, where you actually see a lot of credit and debt concepts get put into existence, because before this, a lot of religious institutes actually had interest payments on debt as an illegal or immoral thing to do. After that, we have the internal order and disorder cycle. So it's kind of like chaos versus order theory, if you're a fan of Jordan Peterson. And then after that, we have the external order and disorder cycle. So these two cycles talk about what's going on inside of a country or a nation and what's going on outside of that country and nation, and how their nation interfaces with the rest of them all together. Additionally, this book talks a lot about indicators of where you are at different points in the cycle. We're going to cover some of that as well and try to do analysis on where the United States falls, in our opinion, in this order of the cycles. So with that being said, I want to throw it back to our first cycle idea, which is the long-term debt and capital markets cycle. I know one of the famous things that I like to say on this show is that there's nothing new under the sun. And according to Ray Dalio, there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to capital and capital markets, as in we've been doing this since about 1300 AD is what it sounds like, when they really started doing money lending over in Italy. So my question to the panel is, out of the long-term debt and capital market cycle, what were some of the important factors that you guys looked at? For me personally, I was looking at, there's kind of you can see when it gets long in the tooth. What he means by that is when you have a lot of debts that actually start to outcompete the physical stuff that you have in a nation. This is where he talks about the idea of your physical markets or your financial markets. And when that financial market, aka the money on paper, starts to rapidly outpace all your physical assets, that's when you start to see issues. So that was one of the things I found interesting. I'll toss it over to the Ray Dalio fan himself. Nate, what you got?
Yeah, the big thing that I was looking at is the debts. The debts, you can tell countries start getting into problems when they start realizing that they have to start printing to pay off debts, which devalues or debases the currency, right? And so it's really easy to tell, like, sort of the health of a country based on that, right?
I hear you. And one of the time old options for countries that Ray assesses is that countries are big fans of just printing money to try to solve problems,
and they'll do it every time.
Like it doesn't really work out, is what it seems like. So, yeah.
Well, it's because with what Ray talks about is you only have a couple of options once you hit a certain point, because the problem with these empires is they keep expanding, right? And they get bigger and bigger and more powerful. And so then once you hit this certain point where you're lending out so much money and all that, it's like, okay, so how are we going to be able to pay back all of these debts? You can either like go to war, right, and just steal the money, quite frankly, steal that value, or you can start giving away the assets that you have for your country, but that's just going to make you poor, right? And you're going to go back to a third world country, right? Maybe not, right? But I mean, if you sell off everything, or you could just print the money, and every single time, there's not been a single variation from this. They always print money.
Yeah, going back to the book, if I remember correctly, he lays out there's really only 3 ways to solve this issue. Number 1, you can either spend less money to make sure that your debt is not growing and it starts decreasing because you actually paid off. He says a lot of people are not fans of this one, this whole spending less money concept. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Option number 2 is you have to increase GDP, either production or assets or just manufacturing of natural resources, whatever it is, aka work harder. If people could do that, I think they probably already would. And then the last one is, you could just magically make more money by just printing it. So that's where that idea comes from. Toss it over to the panel. What do you guys think? Is this an accurate assessment of the three options of solving debt crises?
I think that you can almost combine. So, like, regarding the money printing, when more money is printed, it does have a tendency to stimulate the economy and cause more people to produce what you would call like work or like raise GDP or value or something. I think there comes a problem when the printing of the money does not cause like more of like the valuable stuff being pulled out of the ground and being created. Like that's where you see the issue. And if you print too much of the money too quickly, at least that's my understanding is if you print too much too quickly, then you get in real pickles. But I mean, it sounds like a pretty reasonable 3 option choice. What do you got, Sam?
So I wanted to give a little information from like the residential industry when COVID happened, and we were getting like flooded with those stimulus checks. One of the results of that was a lot more people being willing to spend money on having contractors come out and build themselves a deck, or they're going to all work from home now, so we're going to do a little remodel on the house. So like there was quite a bit of extra work and value created by that. So
Yeah,
I'm just verifying that can happen.
It definitely can. And then this kind of brings me to one of the other concepts in the book, which is that there are 3 types of money that Ray talks about. There is like the hard money, there is the fiat money, and then there is the in between. I can't remember. I think it's what was it called? It's the claim on hard money. It's the difference between having a gold bar, a gold-backed dollar, and a dollar on fiat currency. It is you either have this hard asset that is valuable, you either have a certificate that says you have a claim to a hard asset, or you have what he calls the type 3 currency, which is the asset that is no longer tied to any specific resource, but is kind of just part and intrinsic of the system.
And now there's some new ones that are random digital numbers on a computer.
That was one of the surprising things that I thought Ray might touch on a little bit more, but he doesn't really. He only ever mentions it in passing in the book, which is the idea of digital currency or cryptocurrency in this case. And based on what I was gathering is that he kind of speaks about it like it's an in-between between the type 1 and type 2 money, which is either a hard asset or a claim to a hard asset, which is that it's obviously not fiat currency, but it also exists in this pseudo space where it is either, because it is not a physical thing, but it kind of is a proof of certain physical things. Shout out to good friend of the channel, Crypto Kool-Aid. He talks about different blockchains do different proofs. So Bitcoin, for example, is like a proof of energy, which is that I spent electricity to keep this encryption method going. And then there's something like Zen, which is kind of the complete opposite, which is what he calls proof of gas, which is proof that I paid a gas fee, which is that proof that I have this token because I am ensuring that the system keeps going. And then lastly, we have stuff like Ethereum and Pulse Chain, which is kind of, it's not really proof of work in the sense that proof of like work was the old Bitcoin model is the name for it, but it's more of proof of smart contract, which is that you are actually operating on this system and creating a financial incentive on the system. So that was where I was trying to wrap my brain around how Ray Dalio feels about cryptocurrency. I was going to say, Nate, do you have any more insight as to what the guy thinks about it?
Yeah, he's just now kind of getting into it. So like when he wrote the book, he was a little bit, I mean, boomer, right? But he was a little bit like, I don't really know what this is, but it's definitely something, right? And that's back when he was writing the book. But nowadays, in his newer interviews, of course, people are asking about cryptocurrencies. And so as of right now, he's saying that it's definitely new, and it's going to be. And it's going to be like moving the world forward. And even though he likes to almost doom talk the the United States, the empire of the United States quite a bit, he does start talking about like, but maybe there's something out there that could save it. And in my opinion, it would be cryptocurrency. And he's been kind of like talking about that a little bit. And it's an interesting just kind of a conversation he tends to have.
For sure. I want to touch on it later on when we get to the external cycle stuff, because I think that's where he doesn't explicitly say it. but I think he creates the use case for cryptocurrency when it comes to changing world orders, which is when different currencies become the national, the international reserve currency. The cryptocurrency might not itself be the reserve currency, but it might be kind of like a trapdoor or an escape route for money to flow from one to the other when that changing actually happens. I mean, this is something that we've talked about on this show, or not this show, but the Sunday show plenty of times, which is that in times of turmoil, cryptocurrency is one of the easy ways to get money in and out of a country. Gold bars are hard. Fiat currency usually gets devalued or is no longer accepted. So this seems like a decent go-between. Anyways, I did want to get back to the debt cycle, and I wanted to talk to Sam about this one. He brought up a great point, which is that when we do have inflation, aka stimulus checks during COVID, there was an increase in demand for people to fix and renovate homes. And Ray talks about this, is that like land and home ownership is one of those things that is intrinsically tied to the debt cycle, which is that because the fiat currency is going to devalue, and fun fact, it always devalues. Because it's always going to devalue, people look for ways to store that economic energy in certain things, and land ownership and homes is a massive one. So I wanted to kick it over to Sam and see if he had any advice, any insight onto what the sentiment around people renovating homes during inflation times was.
Yeah, I think that was, largely what was going on. I think there was a lot that was happening as part of the office work change, as like due to COVID than like people having the extra money. But it was definitely like, oh, our lifestyle is changing, and also we have this extra boost of money, so we might as well do this thing. But people definitely, I would say the trend of most people's home style is to, like, that is the thing. Like, that's the biggest, most expensive thing most people are going to own, if they even manage to ever own it. And it's becoming, I would say, unfortunately, most people are growing, as the economy is doing well and people are making money and be able to take out more leverage on this and more leverage on that. People are treating homes as more of a, like, not even of an asset, like a status symbol. Like, we all know that, like, things that depreciate like cars, right? I can go buy a BMW something and it's going to be a nice status symbol, but that BMW something is not going to appreciate in value, most likely. And the same thing is sort of happening with the homes, but people are treating them as if they were, in that they are putting way too much, like, extra into a home that makes it, like, not just beyond functional and nice, but like huge or spacious or whatever. And so there's what comes to mind is that people are getting to the point where it sounds like almost like the 2008 housing crisis. Everybody wants more than they can get. And so it just kind of brings into the question that if everyone's running around that mindset, building these crazy things, or like living and remodeling these crazy things, then at what point are we all going to realize that's not going to work out? So I'm not sure if that, like, really answered your question, but
no, that's a good conversation. So so it sounds like what you're saying is that people were not actively thinking about, there is inflation in the system, I need to secure myself against inflation, but it's more of just like a maybe call it subconscious or like overtly psychological pressures, which is something we've talked about previously, which is the millionaire next door, the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, lifestyle inflation or lifestyle creep. I'll tie it into the internal chaos and order cycle later on, but it sounds like that this might not just be like people logically thinking about how to preserve the power of their money, but it's more an effect of kind of the culture and something that happens almost subconsciously or just through societal pressures instead of just logical thinking about trying to store value in a real world asset.
Yes, I think most people don't think about that like technical concept when they're doing it. I think you're right.
Okay, so it's more of just one of those like secondary effects, which is that it wasn't the thing you focused on, but as a result, we've noticed that this market trend is starting to exist.
Yeah.
I think just to add to that, I think he goes through it in the book that when we're printing money, nobody was complaining, right? Everybody was, give me that money. And nobody complains where the money's being printed, but we are now living what happened. We're now our inflation that we have right now is a result of what happened then. Like we printed all this money was printed, and everybody just thought it was free. And like you said, everybody wanted to upgrade their lifestyles and do this. And now we get to pay for it on the back end, which is it happens over and over in history. Like when you print money initially, nobody's complaining, nobody's crying about it. There's a couple people here and there talking about that this is what's going to happen, but at the time, nobody complains about it. Everybody just takes the free money, and now you see how you just go anywhere on any social media platform, you just hear everybody complaining about how crazy inflation is. It's a result of the money printing we did.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that Ray loves to talk about is the cycle of the boom and bust cycles, and how if there's something that human beings can really can experience, right? Because they can't really experience the couple 100 years boom and bust, right? Which ultimately is the rise and then fall of empires through debasement of their currency. But the boom and bust that's closer to human experience, which is simply good times versus bad times. I'm making lots of money, and then now I'm not making any money. People have this terrible way of just thinking that they will always have their job. They're always going to be making the same amount. The cost of milk is always going to be the same. Maybe it'll go up just a little bit, but then it'll go back down. People are really bad about that. And the richer your company, or not company, your country gets, the richer your country gets, the more people get, number one, lazier, and there is no production coming out of them. And so that goes overseas to people who do it cheaper and work harder. But then number two, people get used to a richer lifestyle as well. And so, as we were saying, one of the ways to get out of that, to get out of the, other than printing money, right, is to simply spend less money. Well, the problem is that people are used to what they're living with, and they don't want to spend less money and live a more poor life, right? When they've already hit that certain level, it's like you can't go underneath it. You have to continue going up, right? So that's a really big aspect that Ray loves to talk about.
For sure. When it comes to his perspective, as an author in this book and the analysis that he's done, I think that he has done a very high level analysis over a long span of time, like literally millennia. So for an individual trying to read the book, trying to understand like how you fit into this ginormous puzzle, it's like trying to understand how your individual drop of water affects the ripples on a very busy lake. It's almost impossible to see. So I think that one of the things that people might have to contend with when reading a book like this is understanding that this is not necessarily a book on how to change the rule set of a game, but understand this larger metagame as a whole and understand what the best move on the board for you right now is. If that makes any sense.
Always make more money. Get out of the and become informed. Like that, you can't go wrong learning how to make more money, learning how to use the system as it exists to your advantage, and using the system as it has existed in the past and how it will likely continue to exist in the future. Like one of the things they touched on is, or like he was talking about his story of being a young macroeconomist or stock trader or something along those likes, and he remembered back in the 70s when gold got essentially banned, or not banned, but when Nixon broke the gold standard back, or broke the gold standard for the second time back in the 70s, he expected the stock market to plummet. What actually happened is everyone went on a buy frenzy because they realized that the dollars being printed are going to be less valuable than the assets that can be bought for the dollars. So the takeaway for the folks at home is like, buy things rather than hold the dollars. That's buy things that retain their value. Like Sam was saying earlier, that BMW car, probably not a good idea. Houses and land, maybe more so. Gold, cryptocurrency, whatever, like Taco Bell stock. Who knows? Like, who knows what's going to last? It's all kind of a crapshoot and a gamble, but that's my little bit I got on that.
Like it. The callback to the BMW thing is a callback to when we covered Rich Dad Poor Dad by Aaron Clary, aka Cappy. He was talking about how really the price of cars is just inflated because everyone's trying to use it as a bit of a dick measuring contest. So it's like, you could just forego that, just get a car that gets you to point A and B, you'll be better. Alrighty, I got two last points I want to touch on for the monetary cycle. Mrs. Producer, if you would not mind screen sharing for me. This document is the PDF that accompanies the book when you get it through Audible. It also is, I believe these are all the different diagrams that are inside the physical copy itself. So this is one of the cycles that is internal to the monetary cycle that I talked about previously, which is the idea of hard money, claims on hard money, and fiat money, aka metal coins, banknotes, and then fiat currency. And Ray talks about how there's actually a bit of a cycle here, which is that in times of war and peacetime, hard money talks and fiat money walks, which is that, like, if you look back at World War I, World War II, a lot of people were saying that we want to exchange in precious metals or other commodities and whatnot, or try to find some other commodity of exchange other than money from individual countries. Then after that, we have claims on hard money. This is where you start getting towards banknotes. And when he goes into the history of I think it's the Netherlands, there was the first international Netherlands trading company. And they got to the point where it was like, look, we need something to move money around easier than handing each other tons of copper coins, because that's just not going to cut it. So that's where you get the idea of banknotes. And then lastly, we have fiat money. If you look at the subtitles of these, we have the descriptions of what they do in regards to credit and credibility. So when you look at the hard money, this is something that minimizes available credit, like the system of credit, but it maximizes credibility, because at the end of the day, gold is gold. Can't really forge it unless you're actually starting to change the material composition itself. Next up, we go to the claims on hard money. This is where credit starts to expand. This is the first foray into that idea of a credit-based system. You're going to have some compromises here and possibility for like forfeiture or counterfeiting, excuse me. But at the same time, you're not completely losing it. And then fiat money maximizes credit, minimizes credibility, because the credibility is basically the word of the people that made it. What do you guys think about this cycle? Anything I'm missing?
No, absolutely. This is fantastic. I love how he's got it all in like a little triangle there. That's fantastic.
A lot of cycles in these diagrams. A lot of cycles.
I'm willing to bet that Mr. Ray Dalio has a pretty darn good idea of this stuff that he wrote a book about. And I would be surprised if one of us over here on the DGen Roundtable is able to point out something that he had not thought about or something like that, minus the cryptocurrency world. But yeah, this is a very good summation. I like it.
Will, to your point, I think the research that Ray has done is very expansive and in-depth. So I think that we as folks on the panel are going to have a hard time disagreeing with the actual research, but I think where we might come to some differences with Ray is in actual strategy and execution. Yes. I guess this is a decent time to bring it up. So here we got the old Ray Dalio. I will admit this is not the greatest picture of him, but pretty much he's born in 49, so he's technically a boomer, and then he has been an investor for a long time. And then if we go down to investment philosophy, he talks about how he has alpha and beta investments. One of the philosophy principles that he operates on is the idea that diversity is good because it means you can't get completely wiped out. He is one of the folks that believes that surviving is more important than growth because the market will wipe people out over time. Let's see. Dalio's goal is to structure portfolios with uncorrelated investment returns based on risk allocations rather than asset allocations. Dalio's hedge fund accepts mostly money from institutional clients. That part's not important. His main strategy focuses on currency and fixed income markets. This is in contrast to buying individual shares in companies like investors such as Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch. So what this is talking about primarily is that Ray, his approach to investing from his career standpoint is the idea that he wants to not look at things from the growth perspective, but from the risk management perspective. So I'd almost argue that he's kind of a flip side of traditional investing mindsets, which is that if you go back to thinking in bets, he's not thinking in bets of upside potential. He's thinking in bets of downside potential. He tries to make sure that no single thing is going to wipe out the entire portfolio. And at the same time, it focuses on stable growth and then taking small calculated bets towards potential opportunity. So that was one of the things that I discovered when I was doing the research for this episode.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I'm pretty sure this was Ray. He ended up losing a lot of money at one time, and he's a hedge fund manager, right? So
There is.
I mean, it only makes sense why something terrible like that would happen, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, maybe I'm just gonna try and survive rather than expand and grow.
Makes sense. Alrighty, last point I want to touch on for monetary cycle. We have one of the ideas that Ray talks about is the idea of measuring everything in gold and seeing how it performs in comparison to inflation. This is not measuring against like US dollars or the British pound back in the day. This is the idea of real GDP, aka the actual buying power of whatever you own. And one of the things that he shows is that does a lot of the currencies, I mean, they always go down into the right. That is exactly what this one shows right here. But then at the end of the day, gold always kind of goes up slightly, but then it always does kind of recorrect a little bit downwards. And then ultimately at the end of the day, one of the things he shows is that gold, it's not going to get you growth, but it is going to keep you out of the negative more than likely. What do you guys think about that?
That's the thing. Like that's how Bitcoin used to be, right? There used to be no stable coins, and so the only way that you could capture any value was by taking all your shit coins, your altcoins, moving it all back over into Bitcoin. And that's why everyone's Bitcoin turned into ETH, turned into altcoins, turned back into Bitcoin, which is hilarious enough, freaking cycle like that, right? But then, yeah, once the stable coins came out, people are like, oh, I'm going to get my dollar's worth out of this. But that's kind of what gold is. Gold is the standard. There is a reason why it was called the gold standard, because human beings have already priced in what they think about gold, how they value gold, right? So no matter what, that price is always going to be there. It's not going to shoot up or anything unless you got some kind of manipulation going on, which there might be a little bit, and in fact it might have been proven. But it's like, yeah, gold just isn't really going to move at all. So technically speaking, if you want to secure your wealth, right, that's where you just dump it all in the gold and go bury it in the backyard,
Yeah, I mean, I think it ties into covering the Ray Dalio investment philosophy, which is that you're never gonna you might not get rich on your less risky assets. However, at the same time, you still take them, in his opinion, because it's going to prevent you from getting wrecked. Let's toss it around the horn here. I want to see what you guys think about the
real
idea
quick.
of,
Actually, I'd like to answer.
Yeah, go for it.
Hex Huddle's thing here, what that he said. So he says that gold is down in the past 40 years. Is gold down, or is it that the dollar is down, right? Because the dollar changes. You know that, right? It's not gold that changes. It's the dollar.
What he's talking about. He's talking about gold in relation to the cost of other things. So like the basically the leverage of what you could do with your gold to trade it for then dollars back then was worth more that you can do with gold trading it for dollars now. So like the gold is measured in the dollars, but like say you remove the dollars, like you remove the dollars from the equation and you use the same like physical amount of gold. So let's say instead of him saying, $600 worth of gold in 1980, he could say 1 ounce of gold in 1980 versus 1 ounce of gold today. The amount of things that you could buy. I think that's what he means. And yeah,
So
that means that the value of the dollar is dropping, and the value but also with like the same amount of gold not being able to do both things at both times, that would be like the whether it's down or whether it's up. And it's all I don't mean to disagree with you. I think that we're measuring a little bit differently here.
Yeah. Check this out. Okay, so you've got the dollar, right? The dollar is pair bonded with real life assets, right? Or things that real life commodities that we use, right? Milk, for example, right? Now the price of milk is up. That's the reason why gold does not buy as much, right? However, at the same time, you need to buy those dollars with the gold so like if you were trying to pair gold with the milk, then what would that be at? How much gold am I willing to give you in exchange for milk, like a gallon of milk, right? So now with the amount of money being printed, where there's more money being printed, now the cost of everything else rises with it, kind of like how Ethereum, as soon as that goes up, then there goes all the alts up as well. So with all the printing going on, that is actually causing gold to sit still. Meanwhile, everything else rises like this. So gold hasn't changed. It's the cost of stuff.
I think we
I might even add an
I
extra
wanna-
dimension. Go for it,
Go ahead.
please.
Really quick, I wanted to just bring up this one here. I
He's not
completely
wrong.
disagree on this. Gold is definitely rare. I agree with diamonds; they can be created. Gold, there is no way to create gold. We've not been able to in years and years of trying. The only gold they've ever created in any kind of lab has been radioactive and therefore not safe for the public. So gold is definitely rare because it technically comes from outside of our planet, and the only gold that we have on this planet came from outer space.
Yeah, it's supernovas. Literally, supernovas are the only thing that creates gold, and those are usually thrown around the universe via like comets and stuff like that. And so once they hit the planet, like the formation of the planet, all the asteroids hitting the Earth had little bits of gold in them. And obviously, as tectonic plates start moving around, shifting around, and all that, eventually this gold just kind of gets together, and then we have a gold mine, right?
Fair enough. To go back to the original point of like $800 of 1980 gold would not buy you what $2,000 worth of gold can buy you today. I think that it is also introducing that third. It's either a second measuring stick or it's a third thing to compare against, which is that it's something that Ray talks about as a metric later on in internal order, which is that cost competitiveness and also the internal cost of things in your country can fluctuate somewhat separately as opposed to the actual cost of your money in relation to the supply of itself. So what I mean by that is that in times of scarcity, things will go up, sometimes even faster or not in direct relation to the amount of value that is being devalued out of your currency, which is that it's a third component. It's no longer a linear scale. It's this triangle thing, and you're trying to see how these all fit together and see which side is kind of dominating the other. But
I'll just say
Your
this.
audio cut out, Zenith. I don't know if you just stopped talking. Go ahead.
Michael Saylor said it best. People that use fiat currency as a store of value, we call them poor. Now it's true that $800 in 1980 will get you more, but if you just had the $800 compared to if you would have had gold, you actually would have had an increase in value in fiat. But the gold's still gold. It's just like one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin, right? So you could have bought $800 worth of gold back in the day, right? You could have got an ounce. If you would have held down to that ounce, yeah, you would have. You can't buy what you could have bought back then, but you actually have more fiat currency value attached to it. So yeah. The price of inflation isn't keeping up with how high gold has gotten, but you still would have more value if you would have stored it in gold and just kept it in fiat.
Yeah, Hex Hodl, you're really stuck on the idea of dollar value. Get off the dollar value. Okay. If you get off of the dollar value, gold hasn't changed. Dollar value has caused everything else to change. And as Ray Dalio says, we are in such a rich country that the items themselves are actually much more expensive. And it seems like if you don't separate the gold, it seems like gold has gone down in price. But you're saying down in price as in correlated to the dollar. If you get off of the correlation of the dollar, gold has not moved.
Real quick here, I just pulled this up on Google because I'm legitimately curious. Gold has gone up in value from 1980s being 850 to over 2,000 in 2020. So yeah, trying to compare gold to the US dollar just doesn't really make much sense. And like Moonpill is saying here, it's a consumable resource. We tend to use gold. And again, we cannot create it. By definition, that is an item that has value because that's what makes something valuable. We use it up and then there's no more. That's not what's going on with our money. We're just making more. So it's not really a valid comparison, in my opinion, to try and say like gold value versus dollar value, because one is a product that we use up. One is something that is just, we just keep making it and we just attach a value to it because that's what we've become used to, which is a lot of what Ray is talking about in the book too.
It's true. I think gold is we're gonna have to put a pin on this at some point so we can get to the rest of the book because there's still a lot. But
I was about
gold
to say,
is
Alan, it's got the right comment for that. Comparison
is the thief of joy. Yes, but it's also how we measure shit. So
it's true. I'm sorry,
yeah,
finish your thought, Zenith.
You're good. The final point, we'll have to touch on this on another episode or something, which is that gold, especially in the last 20, 30 years, has actually become less of a precious metal and has started to become manipulated by either printing paper gold, aka gold futures and whatnot, and then also gold is one of these things where it's possible to actually go, like, obviously you can go get more of it out of the ground. If you have more ways to get it out of the ground, you are technically inflating the supply a little bit, but really you're just utilizing natural resources of countries, which is already factored in. We can talk about this on another episode. I would love to, because this is a very fascinating topic, especially in the last 20, 30 years when we not only did we do like paper gold or gold futures, but also gold ETFs. So with that being said, we are going to move towards section number 2 of the book. And Mrs. Producer, if you don't mind, I have a screen share for this one. There we go. So this is the internal chaos and order cycle. It is constantly repeating, according to Ray. It's the idea of creation, kind of a life cycle, and then the death, which leads into new creation. So this breaks it down into 6 points, and there's really 3 phases. There's the rise, the top, and the decline. So over on the first side, we have new internal order and new leadership. Up next, for the last part of the rise, we have resource allocation systems and government bureaucracies are built and refined. So in the rise, this is talking about things like revolutions, civil wars. Step 1 is you got to fight the revolution and you got to win or not get ousted by the regime. And then step 2 is cool. Congratulations. You're now in power. Now you have to rebuild things or build new things to kind of keep whatever momentum that you have going. Otherwise, it was just a war fought over nothing. Next up, we have the top. This is where you actually reap the rewards of whatever your movement created in the beginning. So at the beginning, we have peace and prosperity. This is, you fought hard, you established your governments, cool, now they're working. Now you can actually see benefit and reward out of the things that you built. And then number 4 is where you start getting to that mid to late game, which is like, okay, we've been operating on this stuff for a while. We've established a status quo. And now you're having excesses and widening of wealth and other gaps. This is that point where it's like, you created a new trajectory and you kind of watched how it played out. So now you got this scatter shot of the people that did very well, the people that did all right, and the people that did not do so great. This is where you get that bell curve distribution of the different people in the group and how it's affecting. Then after this, we start to get to the decline. So up first, we have bad financial conditions and intense conflicts. This is where you start seeing issues within your system and people will actually start pressuring against each other. Step 5 is not a civil war. That is specifically for step 6 and arguably into step 1. What step 5 is what you see before the Civil War. What Ray talks about in this one is the idea that with the French Revolution, historians will mark the beginning of the French Revolution as the storming of the Bastille, when a bunch of peasants basically raided an armory. However, in that moment, no person thought that that was a singular start to that time. This is arguably everything up to that moment, arguably maybe some of the things including that moment, and then finally, step 6 is where we get civil wars and revolution. This is the actual fighting. This is the bloodshed. This is where things are actually changing and are in conflict. This is the point where step 5 is kind of that last chance to get off the boat. Step 6 is where you sink, if that makes any sense. So, gang, what do you guys think about the steps here? Does this cycle make sense? Is there anything that he leaves out in your mind?
One of the most important things that you were talking about and able to make sure that this doesn't actually happen, right? That once the decline goes, and then the empire of the United States of America is gone. One of the things that we can do is improve GDP, right? So what we're looking at right now is an AI revolution that essentially would moonshot GDP, because I mean, those are some very smart robots doing work that otherwise humans would have had to done, right? And these things can work 24/7 way more precisely than humans ever could. So there's going to be a lot of jobs. Oh yeah, also as well as it takes 18 years to create a human, right? To get out into the workforce. It takes an hour once you have the schematics down to be able to create an AI. So there's going to be a lot more AIs running around doing things than humans. And so the worry of like the declining population is going to be a thing. So do you think that there's a real possibility that we actually don't actually decline and we keep our power basically?
This is one of the points that Ray talks about in the book. He mentions during this section that the cycle is not permanent or always going to happen exactly as it's laid out. It is possible to slow down certain aspects of it, and in rare cases it's even possible to reverse areas, which is that if you start the decline, if certain and proper adjustments are made, it is possible to go from a decline back up to a top. However, in my opinion, one of the themes of the book is that this stuff is kind of inevitable. You can prolong it, you can try to fight it for a bit, but eventually the dam is going to break. There is a straw that will break your camel's back, and eventually things are cyclical and they repeat. Maybe not in your lifetime, but over the course of 3, 4, 5 lifetimes. Yeah.
Not poor Agent Jay's camel's back.
Yeah, poor Jay's camel's back has had a rough time.
Well, and I had a
First thing that came to
disagreement
mind.
with what Nate said, that it takes 18 years to create a worker. In America, it does.
Yep.
In
I was
America,
wondering.
you look at these other countries, they have young boys starting working when they're 10, 11, 12. They're working. They're
the kids.
That is kind of the good times we live here, where we got away from child labor because we have a prosperous nation here where that was no longer needed. But in other parts of the world, that's still reality, where young boys are sent out to work, not school. They don't have the luxury of going to school. They need to work since they're young. They contribute to the family.
Yep.
And that's exactly what Ray Dalio talks about too, because once companies from the United States can go over there and have the kids work, right? Not only cheaper, but there's more of them over there, right?
Untapped
They'll work
potential,
harder.
baby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas here, they have to be at least 18 years old. And then also they're gonna be like, oh, I want my work home life, to be good, and I want to be paid more and all that bull crap. So
More work-life balance, Nate.
Exactly. So yeah, it's almost scary how right Ray is about all this stuff.
Yeah. One more thing, that chart kind of reminds me of a meme we've all seen. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create good time. I mean, strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times. It's just cycle.
Yep.
That is the saying as it goes. Thank you, Mrs. Producer. I found what I was looking for. So this is an even more detailed view of the cycle as Ray describes it. So these are actual individual aspects that you can start to see during the cycles. So I'll start, it's 18 points, but I'll try to go through it real quick. So overall in the New Order, you have emerged from a civil war, aka you probably have strong leadership, otherwise you got damn lucky. Next up, we have inventiveness, which is you either got to figure something out, otherwise you're going to regress. Up 3, we have education, which is the raising of the IQ of the overall society, which leads into step 4, a strong culture. Step 5 is a good resource allocation, which means that this is actually going to stay, and this was not just like a raid on a single bank vault. Up next, we have good competitiveness. This is where you actually have what came from your strong culture and your education, your good resource allocation, which is that you have an area where people can fairly compete and they feel like it's fair. Up next, we have step 7, which is strong income growth. This is where you see that things have actually been working out well for you and that people are starting to be rewarded for it. Up number 8, we have the continuation of that, which is that strong markets and financial centers. This is everything has been going well. Things are being established and you're establishing that status quo, aka you know where things are going and you know where things are going well. Now we get to the top. So we have number 9, which is that you've started to max out and things are becoming less productive. Could be for a variety of reasons, but your trajectory is starting to flatten out. Excuse me. Up next, we have number 10. We have Napoleon invading Russia in the winter, aka you're overextending yourself and you're opening yourself up to bad things coming. And up next on number 11, because you are becoming less productive, you have overextended yourself, you're losing competitiveness. If we want to tie this into the next cycle, which is the external world order, this is where you're going to start to see a rival pop up, and where you are losing competitiveness, someone else is going to be gaining it theoretically. Number 12, we have the mid to late game that I mentioned previously, which is that the people that have done very well have done very well, and the people that have done poor have done very poor. And it's able to see the large gaps where they exist in your society between the haves and the have-nots. And that will start to lead into some of the cultural and society problems, which are driving forces in the decline, aka people are mad about it and are willing to do things about it. So now we get to the decline. We have large debts. So for your monetary cycle, this is where your debt cycle has started to run long in the tooth, and your financial markets and your debt market is starting to overtake the physical assets and production that you actually have in your system. Number 14, everyone's favorite, printing money. This is where your money starts to become debased, and you are starting to lose your status as the international reserve currency. Number 15, we have internal conflict. So previously we talked about the wealth gaps opening and the actual political divide that happens between populists and kind of fundamentalists. This is where you start to see that internal conflict. This is where you see lines being drawn, and it's more of an us versus them mentality instead of having that strong culture that you saw in the beginning. Up next, we have the actual happening of what I mentioned earlier, which is the actual true loss of your reserve currency. This is that point of no return for your currency. At this point, this is where a lot of governments are going to start imposing exit taxes or start doing things like criminalizing or making it illegal to hold certain hard assets as a hedge against it. So you can kind of think back to when the U.S. confiscated people's gold as a way to promote the push towards a fiat currency. Up next, we have number 17, weak leadership, aka the leaders in power and the powers that be are unable to deal with what's going on, which eventually leads to someone firing the shot heard around the world, and you get civil war or revolution.
That's kind of scary to look at. I would say that China is right there with strong markets and financial centers.
You think China's at number 8 right now?
Yeah, because they've had a very strong income growth for themselves. Their GDP was crazy for a while, and it started slowing down pretty badly. And now we've got the whole crypto thing going on, and there with Hong Kong and all that. That's really strong markets. It's also a financial center right there. Whereas like on our side, we are definitely right around internal conflict for sure. So that's kind of scary when you put those two together.
Yeah, it is. Let's get the rest of the panel in here. Where do you guys think that the U.S. or other nations of the world are on this schedule right now?
I'll make a quick comment. I know he goes over a lot about China, but I think since he wrote that book, China's had a dramatic backtracking of where they were. I think they overextended themselves.
It's possible. This book was written in it was published in 2021. As far as the writing of the book goes, he does talk about Joe Biden's presidency, so it clearly is at least into a little bit of 2021 when the final writings were being completed. So that's the time frame of this book.
Yeah. So I think since you're reading that book, China has taken a few back steps, mainly because a lot of nations have pulled out of China. They no longer want to manufacture there. They're manufacturing in India now, which is cheaper than China. And a lot of the stuff that's coming to America, they're building a lot of factories in Mexico. So Mexico is actually building a lot of stuff now where China used to. So, but as far as where America's at, don't matter. It's going down. Now, I have no idea. We do have that wealth gaps. We are losing our competitive edge. Those things have already happened. We are in large debts. We are printing money. So I guess, like you said, we're about number 15, where where half the country hates the other half. We're in this internal conflict right now. Where
2016 and Trump, right?
Yeah, they just, there's just a part of the country that absolutely despises the other half, and I don't think you can reconcile that. There's no way around it. They just absolutely hate the other side.
It's all those damn liberals, I'm telling you.
Nah, those are good guys, bro. They let you steal and riot and they bail you out and they give you free stuff and tents. They're good people.
Yeah, I think that it's a decently fair assessment of where the United States is at. Alan Fizame says he despises everyone. So yeah, Alan, you're definitely at number 15.
Alan is one of those people who hates you all equally.
Exactly, you all suck.
I just wanted to say I think we're honestly at 17. I think we're just about there.
The only thing that leads me to believe we're not at 17 is because we didn't hit 16 outright, which is that we've seen failures of other countries to create an international reserve currency.
Yeah.
And as for now, the US dollar is still the reserve currency. But as far as leadership goes, yep, BRICS is an interesting topic that we can talk about at some point in the external cycle as well.
Yeah.
But
I think as far as weak leadership, there is politically weak leadership. But if you look at leadership throughout the country, this country, America, is still the leader in the industry when it comes to innovation. So we still have that. We do have weak leadership when it comes to the political class, yeah. But as far as leaders of industry, most of the strong leaders are here in America. America still has the companies that drive ingenuity throughout the world.
It makes sense to me. I know you guys are probably tired of me talking about this, but I think the fact that the United States has failed to produce a new generation of political leadership shows that we've definitely been stagnating. What I mean by that is the fun stat where it's like the average politician in Congress and is like somewhere above 60 years old. It's like there's no new blood being injected into the leadership class, and it's pretty much just like boomers holding on for control as long as they possibly can, either because they feel that they need to, they have no interest in vacating this spot, or they feel that there's no one capable of replacing them. Whatever it may be, the fact of the matter is that they're still there, and that the reins of power have not been able to pass down to the next generation at this point.
Yeah, I was about to say, Zenith, it doesn't matter why they're there, it just matters that they're there.
I was gonna say, Zenith. So if a bunch of guys, 30, 50 years ago learn how to use manual manual mills and manual lathes to manufacture all these great parts, and they're just the best at it. And all these young new bucks learn how to use CNC machines, coding, programming, all of these things, right? Like the guys who run machine shops with only manual equipment and like they're going to still be there. Like if that's the thing, no one's going to replace them. They're just going to stay there. The question is like all these young people, like is the role of the politicians an old idea, right? Are the younger people trying to gain power by using other mechanics?
Yeah. I like where you're going with that, Sam.
So
was that it? Or did he drop off?
Yep, that was it.
Okay.
You have a point. But I think there is something to be said about something like an established government system, which is that it's the legitimacy. Fuck, I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this. I want to talk about how established government powers do truly exist, and that government force is the only quote-unquote moral use of force that is widely accepted due to legitimacy. I mean, whether or not you agree with that statement, it is kind of the common sentiment of the people. But as far as power resides where people believe that it does.
Yep.
So a lot of people believe that the government is powerful, therefore the government is powerful. And also the government is willing to use force and power upon the citizenry. So it's a good exercise of that power. But to your point, power resides where people believe it is. So if people believe that the forces of certain people outside of the government or politicians have the ability to do things with whatever sort of power they have. I'm not specifically talking about like jailing power or election or taxation power, but power of either a conglomeration of I'm losing it on this one.
I've got a thought for you, Zenith. Okay, so
take it away.
So I just watched the movie Gladiator the other night. And one of the things that happens in this movie, right, is this guy who was a general is able to gain power from the people, like, wanting him. People liked him, and so he was able to overthrow the emperor, right, the bad emperor, dude, right? So would you say that the way people can gain this power these days is, like, because the internet is so spread out and everybody has access to it, like, do you think that Andrew Tate, for example, has more power in influencing people than like some particular senator in the state of Texas, or like I don't even know like what other senators are in other states, like, right? So can that power of just being popularity, can that be wielded?
Popularity is one thing, but also being able to mobilize people is another power. To your point, Andrew Tate, whether you love him or hate him, it's hard to argue against the fact that he has some sort of power or has had it. You could argue that his power has been waning a little bit because, especially in the United States, when it comes to social media platforms of the government, whether you believe that they're working hand in glove or not, but the fact that they've actually been able to deplatform him and that the country of Romania has been able to imprison him, which is that there are forces fighting back, because I would argue that the people that are currently fighting him believe that he has power and don't like the fact that he has it. So he's a great example of, you don't have to have like government rule or a military behind you to have power and influence. Influence in itself is not just popularity, but it's also being able to mobilize people behind a message or an idea or some sort of mission. What do you think? Is that a fair assessment?
I would say so. So do we need all these old people in the office? They could just stay there and like decline.
That's true. However, at the same time, the second half to that question is, what do you do about it? And that's where you start to get into, shoot, I'm going to shout him out again because he's a congressman for the Virginia House of Delegates, Nick Freitas. He runs a podcast called Making the Argument. A lot of I think it's like 3 or 4 of the last podcasts he's talked about is the idea of a possible backlash against governmental power. This is also something that the channel What If Alt History has talked about as well, which is that the idea in a coming revolution, if you move too quickly against a foe, the backlash against you is going to be just as great. And at the end of the day, you're not going to have achieved anything, because you're going to swoop in, you're going to make a bunch of decisions and movements and whatnot. But the people and the will of the people and kind of like the ability and the ability of the general public to accept what you're putting forward is going to resent it, and it's going to push back eventually. So you might be successful for a certain time of period, but eventually all your gains are going to get erased when the pendulum swings back. So do you need to replace the old people? Yes, but it also matters how you do it.
Absolutely. One of the things that politicians have our leaders have a really bad way of kicking the can down the road, right? The reason why is because they're generally in there for, like 4 years, 2 years, and that's it. And then they have to try and get reelected. But able to get reelected, you have to be popular. If you do a lot of things that's healthy for the country because you've looked out at this big macro view, you're going to be very unpopular, because for the people in the moment right there, they don't like you doing a certain thing that's going to be good for the health. It's kind of like eating your vegetables, right? I mean, for the health of the country, sometimes you have, instead of eating that delicious cake over there, you're going to need to eat some vegetables. Well, the problem is, and the reasons why, Americans are so unhealthy, is because our country basically is the equivalent of, hey, you guys want to eat that cake right now? Okay, let me keep giving you cake. And meanwhile, the freaking broccoli is just sitting there decaying,
That makes sense. Eating your vegetables is a great way of putting it.
I think people don't like making the hard choices that are good for them. They rather take the easy route, like you're saying, Nate. And it's like when it comes to money printing, everybody likes it when it's happening, but when you have to deal with the consequences long term, most people don't think about that. And I think that's where we're heading down at the moment. Is most people don't think long term. It's just they want to live in the now.
Yeah, I mean, think about what Sam was talking about with the stimulus checks, right? Those stimmy checks were literally so that way you could pay your rent. And people are going around buying TVs, as Sam says, buying a deck and stuff. Like, well, what are you idiots doing? I should have bought crypto. That's what I should have done with them. But I mean,
I want to know what Hunter Biden spent it on.
Parmesan cheese, the finest of Parmesan cheese.
I hear
That's a good choice, though.
I hear he's been buying up a lot of flour because he's trying to learn how to cook. You know what I mean?
I don't even know where this conversation has gone anymore.
Well, I'm going to try to get it back on track. We're going to do last points on internal chaos and order cycle before we move on to external chaos and order cycles. Once going twice.
I don't think there's
Wait.
anything.
Do I
Wait,
hear a
did you
third
answer the question?
time?
I missed that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was a question or if that was just
did
like
I cut
open.
out? Yeah, throwing it back to you guys. Do you have any final points you want to bring up when it comes to the internal order cycle?
Final point.
The 6 phases of the rise, the top, and the fall, or the more detailed 18 points that we looked at.
I just think that we're at the bottom. Go ahead, Mrs. McGinnis. That's all I had to say. Is I think we're at the bottom.
Gotcha. The only thing I want to say about that is it's just accurate. That's what history has shown and proven. So, I mean, it's an inevitability, and that's just how societies basically go. Nothing can last forever. So, I guess what I'm trying to say, is if people don't think that, oh, that won't happen, we'll never do that. They're wrong. It's going to happen. It's just how it works. So that's one of the things I picked up from this book. Like, the main thing I kind of absorbed was that, yeah, guys got some very good points, and I really appreciate the fact that he's kind of kicking us in the ass to like realize it. You know what I mean?
I'd agree. I think that he's not saying that people specifically shoot for these exact things as they happen, but it's kind of just one of those things that happens over time as a result of external forces or an internal logic that kind of plays itself out over and over, which is that we keep thinking the same thing and eventually arrive at similar conclusions.
Yeah, it's basically like the circle of life, kind of.
So,
the circle of civilization. There we go. That's what we'll call it.
Alrighty, let's talk about last cycle, which is going to be the big cycle of external order and disorder, aka international relations. I mentioned at the top of the stream that this is a book on domestic and foreign affairs, and this is the foreign affairs part. This is understanding where you fall into your place in the world. And the big point in this one is that we wage war in 5 different ways. You have trade and economic wars, you have technological wars, geopolitical wars, capital wars, and military wars. They don't necessarily all go in that order. However, he does point out that typically you need the first 4 to get to the military war, because if you get to the point where you're actually shooting at each other, you've probably tried a lot of other stuff before this, unless like you're a bear in the woods that runs up on a guy. Outside of that, it's probably not going to happen. So
yeah, absolutely. Kinetic wars are definitely going to be your last bet.
Oh, for sure. Yep. So he also gets to another point, which is why do the wars happen? And in his opinion, he breaks it down into 2 different things. And this is a political theory that I've heard outside as well, which is that people don't go to wars over the thing that they want the most, is that people end up fighting wars over trying to prevent the thing that they want to happen the least. What Ray posits in this one is that wars happen over the prisoner's dilemma, escalation. You can't back down because the cost of it is not a material cost, but it is a social or kind of like a not a hit to your ego, but your public image with your own people, and then also just straight up misunderstandings. So first up, the prisoner's dilemma. This is kind of where I had an idea that I wanted to bring up earlier, which is that this book, in my opinion, is a combination of like Sun Tzu, Art of War, Machiavelli's The Prince, 48 Laws of Power, and The Sovereign Individual, and probably like some or the other financial book you want to pick. This is one of the ones where he talks about the prisoner's dilemma is the idea that theoretically, if you can trust other people, then the classic prisoner's dilemma is you and a friend are each brought into a separate interrogations room. The interrogating officer says that if you rat on your friend and admit that you guys did this together, then we will put all the punishment on him for like 10 years or something. And then, but if neither of you guys say that, then each of you are going to get like 2 years of prison time. So the math on this one works out, which is that it is better collectively, it is better for neither of you to rat on each other because it's only the 2 of you doing 2 years together. However, because of individual incentive and motive, if you do not trust that other person or you don't even have any ties to that other person, then yeah, the answer is you should probably rat on the other person, because in that case, that person gets all of the time, if not double time, and you get 0, aka a win. But then there's also the third option, which I forgot to mention, which is that you both tell on each other and now you both do 10 years. So
yep.
This is that idea for the prisoner's dilemma, when it comes to international policy, it's this idea that is kind of brought up in The Prince, which is that sometimes you need to exercise cruelties, not just on your enemies, but unfortunately sometimes inside of on the people inside of your own castle, so that it will prevent further harm later down the line. This is this idea of like, if I don't hit this person first, it means that I'm going to suffer the consequence of some potential thing later down the road. So that's the prisoner's dilemma. Number 2 is escalation. This is just like tit for tat. It's kind of eye for an eye, arm for an arm. Eventually you're going to end up with a bunch of armless blind people. And then lastly, the cost of backing down is too high. This is an interesting one in my opinion, because he talks about how if you back down, it means that you are, to your own people, you are admitting that you are not the person they thought you were. You don't have the capabilities for it, or you don't have the willpower for it. To your enemies, it also looks like you don't have the ability to actually go through with your threats, which also incentivizes them to attack, because it's kind of a sign of weakness. It's showing your stomach. It's showing that you were a paper tiger all along, and that they really have nothing to lose. So the idea is that if I back down, I'm only going to incentivize war, aka you keep ratcheting tensions up. And then lastly is just straight up misunderstandings. It's not understanding where the red lines are, what are the important points, and what gets drawn between them. Alrighty, I've talked enough about that one. I want to toss it over to the panel. What do you guys think? When it comes to the external order cycle, what are the biggest factors that you see going on that cause the change in the world orders?
So the biggest thing I'm thinking is going to be the financial war that tightens up basically people's livelihoods, right? So if you tighten up people's livelihoods and they start getting upset, well, then that anger and that stress and everything starts turning into political distress, which then starts turning into, do something about this, which then starts turning into distress amongst countries. And if nothing is done, and in fact, especially if a more powerful country, like if you're a powerful country and then you have like say 2 powerful countries going at it, then what you're going to end up running into is literal just, hey, you better back off, otherwise we are going to hit you, right? And the interesting thing is, usually what you aim for is you aim for a win-win, right? Something that both countries can be like, you know what, we can deal with that. That's cool. Let's do that. But as soon as you get a more powerful country versus the other one, right, then you start running into the whole issue of like, well, screw that guy, like the prisoner's dilemma right there. Screw that guy. We're just going to have a proxy war or whatever over there, with some terrorists or whatever that's in there, right? So unfortunately, this is a very real thing that I think it is going to be the financial war. Once you hit a financial war, that's kind of the beginning of the end, and you either need to like get to solving it really quickly, coming to a win-win conclusion if at all possible, or at the very least maybe just doing a lose-lose. The example of the lose-lose is going to be literally just China or Russia actually is another one, and the United States, right? Nobody can agree on anything there, and everyone's just kind of fighting each other. And so with a win-win, obviously everyone's like, oh, good buddy, and everything's good. It's your best case. But with a lose-lose, at least like everyone hates each other, but at least everyone's backing away and they start relying on themselves, right? Each country relies on themselves to do better.
Like it. I want to throw it to the panel. What do you guys think about Ray's idea of trying to focusing on the most important things and building those win-wins, as opposed to this inevitable slog where we go downhill towards trying to prevent the worst things, and then you end up with these trying to avoid lose-lose scenarios?
I'm always a big fan of focusing on I'm always a big fan of focusing on the positive rather than trying to avoid the negative, just from like a mental frame of origin perspective. That was basically the end of my thought. Mrs. Magetta, it looks like you had a thought there as well. I saw you come off mute. Did you have a thing for this?
I just wanted to say that I feel like this is what most people set out to do, at least in their own minds. And it just comes back again, kind of comes back to the cycle of that. And I would say the internal conflict part of everybody else has their own idea of what exactly that means, and that inevitably will create conflict. But one thing that I've learned from, I guess, studies of patterns of behaviors is that positive reinforcement is more effective than what's the word, punishment every time. And I think one thing that basically what he's trying to emphasize with this idea is that this would be how you would reverse the cycle, which he's already said is very rare. But if there's any way to do it, if there's any way to break ourselves out of this, and maybe possibly some millions of years from now, eventually achieve a system that doesn't just endlessly repeat this way, that would be the way to do it. You need to be able to acknowledge the negative things and be aware that they happen. Don't deny them. Don't try to hide from them, but move on from them quickly and always aim for the positive instead. Don't dwell on it. But I think we're a long way from doing something like that personally, just with our current system. So
Man, so I like a thought occurred to me while you were talking about the positive being always better than the negative. There that's like one of those like 97% true statements that I don't want to be like the person to nitpick at things, but I will say that there is like if you want good if you want like good growth and development like here and now, then use positive. If you want people to remember something for a long time, you use negative. So like an example would be, a king throwing coins off of his chariot as he drives down the street to reward the peasants for, I don't know, a good harvest or whatever. And then the negative that like everyone will remember is like people's heads on a spike. That also sends a very strong message. So people do react more favorably and produce like when you're looking for growth and development. I think that positive reinforcement is definitely the way to go. And so like I'm gonna agree with your statement that that's pretty much the best one. But like there is a time for negative reinforcement, and that's generally when bad things are happening. So
Will, it sounds like you're going to the age old, is it better to be feared or loved? It seems like there's a use case for both.
Yeah, there's use case for both, but when you're looking for growth and you're looking for development and that's like your primary driver, then positive is the way to do it. If you're looking to just like stop a bad thing from happening, then negative. So I would say like with the goal of driving towards positivity and the world becoming a better place, good to use positive reinforcement. If someone's trying to steal your decks of cards and break your fingers, then you might need to put their head on a spike or something like that. Send a message.
Okay, yeah, Will, you're going a lot further with this than I did.
Yeah.
I was talking about like working at a Walmart or something. You're talking about like murdering people and putting their heads on spikes in like wartime. I totally agree with you though. Like you're completely accurate. That's just not where my that's not what I was talking about. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
so, yeah, you're
for
right.
sure.
You're right.
It was a random thought that I had. Is like, like positivity is really good, but one does have to be like one is benefited by being capable of doing negative reinforcement very powerfully the few times that it might be necessary. From a country's survival perspective, like let's say some other country decides to feel froggy and do some silly things, it might be beneficial to I have to be very careful with my words here. Nuke those motherfuckers right off the face of the earth.
Them.
That it
No,
would
we
be.
don't have
Yes.
to do that anymore. We can just do the old Burns method, release the hounds. Have you seen those new Marine dogs with the machine guns attached to them?
That's
just
cool
release the hounds.
Right when you said that, your dog sat up in the background, Farmer.
Yes, it is. That's true.
Oh, look at him. There he is. Oh, what a good puppy.
Will, to your point,
I wanted to add to that really quick.
Go ahead.
Will, I think kind of what the difference between what we're talking about is you're talking about like wars within the entire like world, whereas more I'm talking about like an internal war, so like civil wars. What I was trying to get at is in my opinion, this would be something that we would be hopefully moving towards in order to end the cycle of eventually having civil wars within our own countries. So the idea of kind of getting rid of that conflict, and instead of going through that endless cycle that he's describing in the book over and over again, this could be like, hopefully, maybe someday, again, thousands of years from now, a potential remedy to break that cycle, because the cycle's been repeating now for thousands and thousands of years, and there's evidence of that going back, I mean, super far. He talks about it like AD. I don't remember what year AD, but AD is far enough back. That's really all, in my brain. That's like, okay, good amount of time there. So what I'm thinking of is more of like internal. Obviously, if we have a war with external forces, yeah, put their heads on pikes. Screw those guys.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever gonna change human nature though, because we're stupid.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah. To your point though, talking about the idea of I better nuke those guys first. I think this is something that Ray talks about this. He doesn't really. I want to get your guys' opinion on this. When I read the book, I was getting the perspective that Ray Dalio is, especially in a lot of the analysis stuff, he's trying to do pure analysis and is not trying to create shoulds or should nots or moral equivalence or anything. He's a lot of times operating from the standpoint of just like pure game theory. How do I maximize my win? First he talks about how do I not lose, and then how do I actually win from there? And when it comes to the external war conflict, it goes back to the idea, which is that he talks about if you are a established power and a rival is coming up, it is better for you to strike first and strike early. Yep. If you are a rival power coming up to challenge an already established hegemony, then your chance is try to draw out conflict as long as possible so that when you do actually get to the shooting guns portion, you are at your peak and they are on their decline. As opposed to the previous one, which I mentioned, which is that you want to snuff things out early if they are on the rise and you are at the peak of your power. So I see these isms in the way that he writes, and it's not really it's not a prescription, it's a description. Do you guys disagree with me on this one?
No, that's the USA versus the USSR. That's what happened there.
Subversion from within, like we have a lot of like, we say that we won the Cold War and we beat all these other places, but you look at the state of our country now, like especially young males, they're very weak. They don't have any backbone. They're very flamboyant. They're not ready for a war. There's very few men that are still men in this country because it's not encouraged anymore. I think that was one of the, let's take it to current events like TikTok. The big banning of TikTok was that's like the stuff they push on there is just garbage. And it just, you slowly do that throughout time, and you have a generation of weak men, which is what we have now. We just have these weak men that don't do anything. That's why, like, if you work in the trades or anything manual, you can actually make a pretty good, decent living, because everybody wants to do everything that's soft. Because we have a bunch of soft men here that don't want to do any hard labor, anything that's labor intensive, they'll dismiss it. Even if they earn twice what they would do doing what they do now, they would rather work at Target, pushing carts or being at a register than actually doing anything that's labor intensive and actually be able to provide for yourself and be self-sufficient.
Hey, those carts are very labor intensive.
Especially the ones with the bad wheels.
Yeah. I wanted to say, Farmer J, that goes back to your point earlier about good times creating weak men. That's exactly what we're seeing right now.
I think that's one of the reasons why, I mean, the people that are in charge, I mean, they know more than we do. There's a reason why we have that open border down in the South. There's we have a lack of men that want to do labor here, but you have people that come from south of the border. They're not just from south of the border. They're coming from south of the border, but they're coming from everywhere from everywhere from the world, right? They're actually willing to do the work, and I think America has the unique. I don't think we've had this in history before, where America has. It's a unique place where it replaces that pool of weak men with strong men that come from these third world countries where they had a rough life. You know, like we have a replenishing supply of people that are willing to do the bottom barrel work, where other countries don't have that because they don't believe in importing people to do work for them.
So one way that we could reverse this, okay, is have a closed border, but also have it be kind of open in a way, right? So it's closed to nobody can just walk over it. However, open to anybody who wants to come and be in the United States of America. We
Well,
will
anybody that
freely
wants to
give,
contribute.
we will freely give things out, but you have to pass a couple of tests. These tests are: do you truly want to live here, aka learned about the culture of the United States, right? And then number two, are you willing to work hard for your
Yeah.
money? No
Yes.
free give outs.
Yeah, if you wanna contribute, if you wanna actually contribute to this society, then those are the type of people that should be welcome. But people that want to cause harm and havoc and stuff, those are people we should turn away. But that's not what's currently happening. It's just a free for all.
Yeah, that would be cool though. Like, go ahead, Zenith. Looks like you got something.
No, I'm just Hemi and Han over here, where it's like typically I'm very much like with you guys, and I'm like, yeah, we should like have. Like, yes, having an open border is a problem, especially for in a country that has started to adopt it more of a welfare / social like safety net program, because now you're just adding infinite taxation on a system theoretically because you're not controlling input. However, at the same time, the idea of illegal immigration is, from an economic standpoint, is also a very complex topic. And it goes to kind of an idea, which is like, how do you, as a nation that progresses throughout time and especially becomes very wealthy like the United States, how do you manage the actual labor force and whether or not you have cheap labor versus not cheap labor, and what that does to your actual production output? As far as a prescriptive description, other than I'm a big fan of enforced laws and don't give away your money for free. Taxation is theft. And if you just keep taxing me more and more, then you're eventually going to disincentivize people to even pay taxes to begin with. So I'm big on the incentives idea, and that you need to incentivize people properly to always act in their self-interest, which also contributes to a greater like group overall if you want to be involved in that. But as far as the whole immigration thing, like, it's an interesting topic, but I don't know if it is necessarily addressed by anything in this book.
And to Centurion's point, they do their children do become weaker, but that's not an issue when you just have a continual import of supply. Like, our border hasn't closed since like their children get weak. Yeah, they are weak, but then you have a new generation that's still coming in, and you're importing constant labor, and it's like, it's good for the economy, but it's bad for the people that are here. Like, it only benefits the people that are on top, because whether they're on the left or the right, both parties that are in charge at the way top, they like cheap labor. That's why the border isn't closed at the moment. It's not a left or right thing. It's the people that are in charge don't care about closing it. They both of them benefit differently from it, and the working class is the one who suffers.
Can I tie this into crypto, Zenith?
Go for
a little
it, brother.
bit?
Please
I'm
do.
thinking, so I think that this might be the problem of Hexaco, or the problem of like being surrounded by a crypto, like a cryptocurrency. We're all wealthy because we got rich gambling on crypto, right? It's like, at the end of the day, the world revolves around goods and services. So there needs to be people sweeping the streets, cleaning the toilets, laying the brick and mortar, picking the crops at farms, or operating the machines that do that. Like, there's all these problems that need to be solved. And when people are wealthy and they're living with a wealthy mindset and they're doing not wealthy work to like, and like trying to earn a wealthy people wage doing not wealthy people work, like, I'll use the fast food industry as an example. People talking about wanting to get $25 an hour, or like, remove the number and just replace it with the concept of like, the value does not correlate with the job, right? When you have a whole bunch of people that want to get paid a lot of money for doing a little thing because they live in a wealthy world where things are expensive, then we get the part in Ray Dalio's little example there, where he talks about the wealth gap and the disparity between the different like economic classes and things. I would say that immigration is, I don't know if needed is the right word, but there needs to be people doing low value jobs. There needs to be people doing high value jobs. When there's
So
no hope for people to transition in between, like from the low value into the high value, and the wage disparity is like solidified, that's when the people that are in the low value areas start getting rowdy and unruly and attempt to, you know, overthrow the system as it exists. One thing that we all need to consider as, you know, potential future crypto gazillionaires or whatever the heck is like, once we have a whole bunch of money, it would behoove us to still create products that other people want to buy and do services that other people want to invest in. If we're just wealthy people sitting on our laurels, then we'll be in the same position as the wealthy people that we are more or less talking about in the United States economic system. It's like,
yeah, like you said, if we're all rich, but you can't pay somebody to do any kind of work, like what does it matter? You're all poor then.
Yeah.
Like,
if we're all millionaires, then who pours the coffee and what is he getting paid to pour the coffee, right? It's like when everyone's rich, no one's rich. It's kind of like it's like the
who's
pirate
gonna
island.
take my cans in when I cash them in if nobody's available to work?
Exactly. We're all getting paid, you know, $100 million an hour to do the same job that we were getting paid $100 an hour because the inflation. This is for those of you who man, I don't want to spoil the TV show Black Sails, so I will use a different example. Dang. That's such
I've got an example for you of a society of rich people. I mean, hell, a lot of them were trillionaires.
Yeah.
But they also lived in 1932 Germany, so they were struggling to buy bread.
Yeah, exactly. So
that was
like,
franc, right?
Yeah, the German franc. Oh my god, the super inflation. It's either that or like Zimbabwe. Also is one of the infamous examples where they literally have like a. It's I don't know if it is Rhodesia, but it's one of the ones that has like the $1 billion note. Like it literally has like the $1 billion, and you're like, wow, this is worthless.
I'd like to ask the Herc about the history of that down there, because as I recall, he spent a lot of time over in South Africa, and so he knows a thing or two. Probably, I would presume he knows a thing or two about Zimbabwe since they are close neighbors and things.
Yeah. So to tie it back a little bit.
Yes, please.
Sorry, Nate. Nate, take it away. I talked to you.
I just wanted to add on a different way of thinking about the wealth gap, right? People are always like, oh, there's a wealth gap, right? Well, do you know what the wealth gap actually is? Think about it this way. What is the 80-20 rule? And then how many people are just happy just sitting around doing nothing versus how many people are out there really putting energy out into the world, right? And trying to do something. So that wealth gap is nothing more than an energy gap in humans trying to build versus humans being okay not building or doing anything.
Sure.
That makes sense. It's the idea like 20% of the people do 80% of the output.
Yep.
That kind of thing. Alternatively, 20% of your customers will give you 80% of your problems, but
there you go. And 80% of your finances. So it's like
it's also true.
It could be extrapolated onto almost anything.
Good old Pareto principle.
Bring us back to the book, Zenith.
Yes. So
there was a book.
Allegedly, there was a video at least. There was a video. I heard it had animations, so it'll keep you interested. It's not like quite the Subway Surfer split screen thing, but it's still something. Anyways, when I think about this book in relation to the fiscal cycle and how it relates to crypto, I see crypto as either a top signal or a bottom signal right now. When it comes to the book's description of what the top signals look like, it says that people start spending on unnecessary luxuries and they start to rationalize and justify it. And it kind of shows that the money itself is getting long in the teeth and that people are getting fat, happy, lazy, whatever you want to say. I see that when I look at like NFT stuff from last cycle. I understand it doesn't really have a use case and it more was just a little extra thing that was pushed by an already overheated market. But then conversely, on the other side of the house, a big bottom signal that I see is the actual introduction of things like Fetch AI and decentralized AI usage, and then also DPIN. This is a sect of the crypto community, or not community, but the cryptosphere, which is decentralized physical infrastructure. This is the idea of taking cloud computing and then actually putting it decentralized. It's taking the Amazon Web Services servers and using it decentralized. This is, you no longer have to go to Amazon to host your website. You can go to a network with a bunch of people. Like, I could probably put my PC on that network right now and say, hey, I have a graphics card. I only game like 2-3 hours a day. When I'm not gaming, feel free to use the graphical processing power of my graphics card to whatever project you want. That is a decentralized physical infrastructure stuff. That, in my opinion, is a bottom signal. Because it's technological, it's innovative, and it's also a shift in how things have been happening, and it's an opportunity for growth. So when you do look at crypto, like Will said, if everyone is rich, no one is really rich because no one's willing to go pour coffee for each other. But at the same time, this book in particular is very much about the macro view, instead of like trying to focus on your individual view and your tiny frame of perspective. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to do that anyways. This is more of just an analysis of what's going on. So I can see how something like the crypto space right now is kind of showing these top and bottom signals at the same time. Am I crazy on this one?
Nah, you're on point, bro.
Okay.
It is top and bottom signals. But I mean, like, you just got to look at the density. Like, what are we getting more of? And then also, like, are we good at measuring top and bottom signals? Are our guesses correct? You never know. We're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, bro, and hoping something sticks, man. We're just a bunch of degenerate gamblers here.
Well, I'm pretty damn accurate then. I really know how to throw the spaghetti.
It's been throwing spaghetti real good here, so good on you, man.
Not today though, because I got rugged on Solana.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, sometimes you rug, sometimes you put the meatball through your neighbor's window. Alrighty, so trying to think. Any last points? The only other thing that I can think about is there was a point that Farmer you brought up, which is the idea of it kind of tangential to the weak men philosophy, and the idea of saying that people are unwilling to do the work. It's the book kind of talks about the late stage of the internal cycle becoming that political and internal strife. It's very easy for people in the moment to look at issues and then pick the side, honestly, because they're incentivized to pick the side. Doesn't matter which one, as long as you pick a side. Because when you get to that internal conflict point, Ray says that it gets to a point where you are either with group A or group B, and the people left in the middle are really left hanging and end up almost being hated more than the people on either side. But as far as when you get to this point, he mentions the idea that when you have the widening gap of wealth, it is easy for either side to pick their strategy and promote it because they're incentivized to, which is that if you have the wealth, you are incentivized to believe that you earned it, and that I'm not saying it's wrong to believe this or anything. I'm saying you are incentivized to believe that you earn it and that it is just and that the system is good. If you are on the other side of the things, you are incentivized to believe that something is not working for you. Therefore, you have the ability to rally people through appeals to emotions and whatnot. It's not a moral argument about what you should do, but it is an analysis on what tends to happen, which is that these different groups are incentivized to do their competing strategies, and then that sets the stage for the decline of the internal cycle. Eventually, that leads into where you start getting the alignment of all the three macro cycles. So the final question I want to ask you guys is that we've examined all these three different cycles. We have the monetary cycle, which is, unfortunately, money printer eventually gets turned on and goes burr. We have the internal cycle, which is that, like Farmer Jay was saying, strong men make good times make weak men make bad times make strong men. And then lastly, we have the external cycle, which is that in the international arms race, we're unfortunately kind of incentivized to fight against each other, and that there are certain ways that these things happen, whether it's economically, politically, through technology, or just straight up warfare. So my question to you guys is that based on your understanding of the book, do the cycles drive each other to create changes in world order, or does the world order happen when these three cycles line up on their own, independent of each other?
I already answered that one, because remember I was talking about the financial war and how that ends up leading to like strife and all that. Yeah, they absolutely do, in my opinion.
Which one? You say that they happen to align or that they drive each other?
They drive each other.
Okay, I see that.
Could you repeat the full question?
Do the three major cycles drive each other, or do you just get the New World Order when they kind of just randomly spin and then all line up together at the same time?
Man, fuck if I know. I would say that they probably drive each other. That's my best guess, anyways. There's got to be a bunch of things that I don't know, that I don't understand. But my instinct would be to say that they drive each other.
Well, think about this, Will, right? So financial trouble, right, turns into internal trouble, right, which then turns into war, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when you look at all these, I think they drive each other because humans react emotionally, obviously. And so when people are not happy over something, right, they're gonna start trying to fix whatever it is that's hurting them, rather than trying to actually, though, fix the disease. They're trying to fix the symptoms, and that usually just drives on even bigger problems, and then more problems arise, and then they try and fix those problems, and more problems arise. So I think that's why I think they drive each other.
Yeah, I do not disagree. I'm thinking about, like, what are the things that I don't even know about that are behind the scenes happening, And so, like, I'm leaving the potential for the unknown unknowns to screw with my understanding. So that's what I got.
Well, me personally, I don't know if they drive each other necessarily, but when they do exist, they definitely compound on each other. Like you said, it's just one thing after the next, after the next. It just keeps adding to the next one, and the next one adds to the next one, and you start having more instability, which leads to other things. And so I definitely believe that they compound on each other's. That's pretty much my thought on it.
Sam, what you got?
I'm gonna have to go with the compounding, because it sounds like kind of like Nate was saying, just like the behavioral part of the way, like, these kinds of processes stack. Like, there are so many parallels to other, like, stacking processes. Like, this is a more positive one, not a negative one in this case, but like the whole thing I heard recently about knowledge, money, and time. Right? You spend like a bunch of time to make money, and then once you make a bunch of money, you can take that money, or sorry, other way around. Spend a bunch of time to get knowledge. Once you get a bunch of knowledge, then you can make a bunch of money with your knowledge, and then once you've made all the money, you can buy your time back, and you can keep that loop going. And so, like, I think generally most cycles are produced by human behavior. So I would just have to agree.
Fair enough. All right, Mrs. Producer.
I think I'm probably with Nate. I think they all drive each other. And the reason I say this is because they're all very interconnected, in my opinion, from what I've observed with how the world works. When the world is in a position of peace, kind of like we are now, and some people would argue that, oh, we're not at peace. There's all this drama going on. Well, the drama is because we have peace. We have the ability to have this internal drama with ourselves because nobody's bombing us, basically. So to me, yeah, they all go hand in hand. I think it's very interconnected, and I also think, hopefully we don't get, in trouble for this, but some of it's manipulation by those who are in power. So.
Okay, we're an hour and 50 minutes into the stream. I think YouTube isn't watching.
Fair enough. Conspiracy theories abound. Let's go.
Yeah. I think I might have a slightly different take, which is that I think that the internal chaos and order cycle drives the others and is not driven by the others. What I mean by that is that I think you cannot have your financial cycle really kick off until you have a society that is able to drive that thing itself. And additionally, unless you have an internal order and chaos cycle that is able to create a society that is worth anything, you're not going to be able to get into foreign affairs, and you're not going to be able to have that said money supply. As opposed, once you do get that internal cycle going, I would agree that, yeah, it does start to drive the other cycles, which is that there's a rhyme and a reason to everything. And eventually you make the money, you debase the money, and then you just go wild with it. And then additionally, on the world stage, someone has to be in the lead. There will be a first place. There will be the biggest and best one that people use as the unit of measurement and exchange. And whether it's the Dutch, what was it, the Gallard? I can't remember the name of their currency.
Yeah, the Guilder or something.
Guilder, thank you. The Dutch Guilder, the British pound, the American dollar, or I'm gonna screw this. Chinese. They don't use yen. Is it the yuan?
The yuan, yeah.
Whether it's whatever one of those is the world reserve currency, that there will be one. It can change, but it's not going to. I would love to be interested to see that. I'm not gonna say I would love to see it, but I'd be interested to see. But I think that you're not going to get the change of the world order until you get all three of those to line up together, and that you're not going to get that external factor wheel spinning unless you get the other two spinning first. I think an example of this might be Scotland and Ireland, and the idea it's like they had a bit of a society, but at the same time they never really got their internal order going because they suffered from what I like to call main character syndrome, which is that everyone believed that they were the rightful ruler of Scotland and that there's no one more Scottish than them. So they ended up fighting themselves, and then were eventually taken over by the English and integrated into that society. So it's like, it's possible, but unless you get your society off the ground, you're never going to experience the other two cycles.
Scotland forever.
Scotland. What do you guys think about that?
I think you're absolutely correct, because that's something I guess I didn't really think about is when you're starting. Like for me, I was thinking about the decline, right? When you start going down. However, when you are on the rise going up, it's the people first, it's the people first that then build into the monetary system. And then from there, everything starts compounding or driving each other, however, whatever word we want to use. But yeah, I 100% agree with you, Z.
I don't think Ray Dalio explicitly focuses on it, but he does mention it in passing a bunch of times, which is that things are able to go in reverse or fail to reach the next stage. And that I think that when he specifically talks about, especially the Civil War aspect of things, which is that when you have that Civil War aspect of things, it doesn't necessarily have to transition to an entirely new system. But theoretically, the system that is in place, it can win, but it doesn't lose, but it also doesn't win, and instead it gets transformed. So the people that were fighting you don't take over, but you will never be the same, and the cycle has to restart from there with similar people in power. It's the idea that, like, people will try to perform the coup, you can crush the coup, but because the blood was shed, things will never go back to the way they were.
Yep.
Well, one thing about it's not necessarily like this. So with the transformations, it's not necessarily like kinetic. It's not necessarily always a war. It can be peaceful as well,
Yeah, bloodless coups are absolutely a thing. You don't have to have a force on force conflict to have a change of regime power or a changing of the guard. Fair enough. Alrighty, it is that time of the show. We're going to go to our final thoughts and let people know where they can find you. Speaking of which, we're going to start off with the Ascending Man himself. Nate, any last thoughts on the book? What'd you think of it?
This is a fantastic book. This is definitely up there with one of my favorite ones.
Would you call this a required reading for people in our space, or is this more of a personal musing?
As of right now, with where we're at, I would say it's required. The reason being is because there is a big switch that could easily happen for your kids. The majority of people in this space, in our community, right, are trying to make that generational wealth for the next people past them, right? Next family members past them. So this is going to be something that they're going to have to pass on that knowledge and able to, well, try and either save or help, however you want to put it, their own kids. And then those kids as kids. But with that being said, I'll just go ahead and run us through to a closing. I am the Ascending Man at the DGen Roundtable. And we are going to be on Pulse Chain Conference. So that's going to be in the next, what's that, 3 hours, 2 hours?
3 hours, yeah.
3
hours from now.
2 hours, because it's going to be
it'll be 10
12
p.m.
o'clock
time.
Oh yeah, I knew that.
Midnight. It's 9 o'clock for me. I'm Central Standard Time. In 2 hours we are going to be having our panel. We are going to have on RG3 as well as freaking Axis Alive. So it's gonna be a good talk. I've got a couple of things I know I wanna talk about. Hopefully, we don't go for like 16 hours because you know how us and RG and Access, we can just go on forever and ever. But yeah, guys, go watch it, man, because it's gonna, or put it into your notifications. Watch us tonight. It's gonna be absolutely fantastic. And with that, I will go ahead and move things over to the lovely Mrs. Get It.
You know what? I'm going first. I didn't expect that one.
Switching it up. What'd you think of the book? Where does this one fall for you?
I think for the crypto space, it would be very important. I definitely think he talks about really good cycles and exactly why crypto is basically becoming so very important, because what's going on with our money, he's really emphasizing that is a pattern that has repeated, and ours is doing that exact same pattern that he describes. So, I mean, I to me, that makes it absolutely essential for crypto people. So that's about all I have to say about that. For me personally, like I said earlier, I unfortunately did not get to do the entire book because it is 16 hours and I did not have that time because I slacked off this week, quite frankly, a little bit. Yeah.
All good.
Um,
All good in the hood.
So for me, I don't really feel like it would be fair for me to place it in my own like top 10 type of a thing. Until I've gone through the rest of it, which I think I will. This one actually might be worth taking another look at another time too. Maybe kind of somewhere down the line, putting out another video about it and talking about some of the stuff that we didn't really get to get into. Other than that, I'm actually going to be on the Pulse Chain conference as well. Maddie asked me kind of last minute to jump in there, so that's what inspired this lovely icon, because he was like, "Can you get an icon before we go on? Because I guess that's important." So now I have one. I'll be using it there. Eventually, hopefully, change it to something else. But for now, this is great. And other than that, if anybody wants to talk to me for any reason, I am in our DGen Roundtable Telegram. You can find the QR code if everybody would like to point towards that little guy, Farmer J. It's right under you.
Right under my big head, right there, right there.
Perfect. And yeah, let's go ahead and pass this on to Will. What's going on, Will?
So I am going to, you guys can catch me later on tonight over there on the Pulse Chain Conference. I'll be with these two fine gentlemen, Mr. Nate and Mr. Zenith, as well. I believe that Brendan will be joining us from the DGen Roundtable. And like they said before, Axis and RG3 will be there as well. As far as my thoughts on the book, I thought it was decent. And I think that, so I don't know if did we cover the entire book? Because I've seen some suggestions in some chats that we should do, that this should be a two-part thing. So did we cover pretty much everything that you wanted to cover with this one, Zenith?
I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to. The only thing I think I forgot to mention was I talked about it in the first part, which is that I think the point that Ray Dalio brings up for the purpose of cryptocurrency is that it's very useful when the changing of the guard happens, which is that if you look at the internal chaos and order cycle, once you get to that late stage, like the Civil War and the actual seizure of hard assets, then that is the time to use cryptocurrency, because that is where you have the ability to transmit money and value over a blockchain, over any boundary you want, to any person you want, anytime you want. It is hard to bring cash or gold bars out of a war-torn country, but it's easy to make a crypto transaction. Or if you're like a very intelligent person like Crypto Kool-Aid, he has the ability to access his crypto wallets anywhere in the world using the things he memorized, because he built a system that allowed him to do that. So as long as you're physically there, you have access to that crypto.
Yep.
Or you can learn a keister. You can learn a keister.
I don't know if you want to keister a hard wallet, but yeah, try it.
So for the folks at home who want to, actually, I take it back. I'm not quite done announcing things yet. Let me pull out my handy dandy book here. So this is, for those of you who have not heard already, this is the Brothers Two of Them cookbook. Sam and I, my brother right down there, we have written a fantastic cookbook that explains to you guys, and look, here's me and here's Sam as AI generated old people, so you guys can see what we're going to look like there in the future. But anyways, the Tower Climber cookbook is for sale. There are 50 of them. If you guys want a copy, then hit me up. You guys can find all of my socials, all of my crypto everything at will.pulsechain www.dot.pulse.fyi. So I will go ahead and drop that in the chat. That will also link you guys to my link tree over there. But that's got all of my socials. That's got the wallet that that you guys can send $10 to if you want me to hand deliver it, or if you want me to ship it to you, then send $30 over there in whatever stable coin works. I think DAI is probably easiest. DAI from Ethereum. You can either send it on the Ethereum chain or you can send it on the Pulse chain. Just tell me whatever your transaction was, or like go make a condom wallet or something, or I don't know, figure it out. That's how you guys can send the money to me for payment. Or if you really want to, then we can work out Cash App or Venmo or whatever the fuck. But that's the easiest one right there, where everything is centralized, is will.pulse.fyi. And you guys can reach out to me using any of the socials that are on that linked website. It's kind of like Linktree, but just for Pulse Chain. So it's pretty cool. You can reach out to me on Twitter. You can reach out to me on Telegram. You can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, any of those things. Like, follow, subscribe, comment, bitch, moan, complain, all that good stuff from that one point right there. Other than that, I run a meetup channel called the Hex at t.me/Hex meetup, as you guys can see written down right here. It's essentially a meetup chat for Hexicans to get together and meet up and hang out and do cool things. So if you're a Hexican and you want to meet up with other Hexicans, then just click this link that I am currently copying and about to put down in the channel or in the chats and things. And yeah, hop on in there, join in the discussion, read through the start here, introduce yourself if you wish, and then go meet up with other Hexicans that are in your area. I've made a whole bunch of areas. So go reach out and have a fun time. Mr. Sam Stevenson, where can the folks find you, and what did you think about the book, my friend?
Man, so I thought this was a great book, but honestly, in the hierarchy of needs of most people, this is probably not worth reading before a lot of the other books that are out there, in my personal opinion. If there are aliens out there, I'm not going to be concerned with what I would do when I'm confronting them yet, because I'd have pretty much nothing I could do. So, like, this book is very complicated. I'm not going to go start making like world trades and stuff like that. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm just going to try to make money, use basic wealth preservation principles and go with that. And I think that's what most people should do. It's great to read complex things, and I'll probably approach it again later when I have more time and opportunity and can understand more and could even understand it better. But that's what I think of the book. And people can find me at, if you just message me on Telegram at t.me/Samuel D. Stevenson, or join my Bungalows for Bachelors construction group, where we talk and learn about residential construction. And honestly, everybody lives in a house of some kind. How long are you going to wait until you decide you want to know something about it? Because the changing world order might happen soon, and you ought to be thinking about, what can you accomplish with your own hands should the world fall into the hands of the Chinese or something like that. So that's all I got, guys.
You convinced me. I'm going to go now binge all of your shows.
Please.
Do it.
All right.
Jay, did we hit you yet?
No, I guess it's on me. As far as how the book goes,
hanging out under.
Yeah. As well, I'll address the book real quick. As far as the book goes, I think it's just another thing you can put under your belt as far as useful information to navigate the world. Like I said, that most people aren't willing to put in the work. It's just not always physical as well. It's also educating yourself on world topics and not being blind to what's going on in the world. So this is just another tool you can put in your toolbox. This book, like I said, like Sam said, it's not the end all be all. It's not something, but it does have a lot of useful information that you can put together with everything else you learn, and so you can navigate through this financial system that we currently live in. Just a tool is very important. It has a lot of very important points in there, a lot of knowledge, but it is a very long and freaking very complex book with a lot of charts and stuff and pictures. So if you have the time, you can go through it, but if you don't have that kind of time at the moment, there's other books you can get also value from, you can read, but you should always strive to expand your horizons and your knowledge. And as far as where you can find me at the DGen Roundtable Telegram and trolling around the chats that y'all be on the places y'all be later on today. I'll be there trolling.
Love it. Alrighty. I'm going to hit some chats before I give my take on the book and the final wrap for this thing. First and foremost, we do have a super chat from one of our friends from the north, Brother64. He says, good stuff on a Friday. Thanks, D-Gens. Thank you for the 5 maple syrup money dollars. I don't have a good name for that. Although your money does technically smell like maple syrup if you scratch and sniff it. That's the new one.
Justy Bucks.
Justy Bucks. That's a good one. I like that. Alrighty, we have Moonpilled Rational Optics, good friend of the channel. He checked in, said, hey, hung out for a good bit. And then we have a wild madman in the chat. We have Hex Huddle Pulse. He says, any DGen plays on here at times, and maybe y'all should launch one also.
We may or may not have a project that could possibly be coming out. If you go over to the Forge, Forge-NFT, you will be able to find it because, somebody from a member from the DGen Roundtable has maybe started something up, or at least started the process.
Yes, I will say this much. Someone did reach out to me and say they wanted to make a just for fun NFT collection with some, I guess, full moments about the different people in the DRT team, along with other people in the space. So I gave them fodder about myself, and I'm curious to see what they come up with. Speaking of projects, though, by the way, after this, I know I'm going to be there, and I think anyone else is welcome to join, but the FN Hangout tonight is actually a launch party for some friends of RG3's and friends of ours, Crypto Kool-Aid and the iBurn Protocol. So go check out Discourse Syndicate after this when you're done, and you might see us on there, and you will definitely see a lot of good folks. We like them a lot, and some of us around here are interested in that protocol. Cough, cough, it's me.
Yeah, I'll be there.
All right. Excellent. Next up, we got Alan Fizame. He says, I'm with Hex Hodl. Agree. Hex is one of the best ways to hold value in the cryptosphere, in my opinion. And I think that's a pretty common sentiment shared by a lot of people on the team here. Next up, we got Hexkin Lost in Asia. He didn't stop by for the strip club music, but instead he stopped by just to like the smash button. He says, enjoy the conference, D-Gens. Go Dodgers. I don't know what's going on with baseball right now, but apparently Dodgers are playing.
Dodgers.
We got Brother 64 saying we had some great points. God, that was like an hour into the show. I think we were talking about the monetary cycle stuff at the time, so much appreciated. We got Chicago Brew. He's saying that the new world order is actually the old world order. You're going to own nothing and be happy, aka Great Reset. Poor, you're all serfs and slaves. Well, if you want to try to avoid that, don't be a person that uses fiat currency as a long-term store of value, because Michael Saylor will come out of the woodworks and call you poor. Last but not least, we have good friend of the channel, longtime DGen as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Funkmaster Hex. He says, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. He's got the drink as well. I had a beer earlier, but I already crushed it. So that is what I got. All right. Am I missing anything? Good to... Fair enough. Yep. Will's got the link for Discourse Syndicate going on. And then I guess it's my turn for final thoughts. I think that this book, I'll say this. I agree with Sam. I think this book is something that you should not read first. This is a book that requires a lot of other context, and you kind of have to be interested in the concepts. As far as the portion on the monetary cycle and understanding how fiat currency kind of shows up and then dies off, I think that is important for people operating in the crypto space. But other than that, you don't need to put yourself through the masterclass on domestic and foreign policy and relations. That is not entirely necessary. However, to Farmer's point, it does seem like the United States might be in a bit of a critical period. So understanding what's going on here might be a way to at least get some perspective on what's going on instead of just falling into tribalism. Because unfortunately, as Ray talks about, that is the point that it looks like we're moving towards in the book. I'm not going to call it a top 10. I will call it an interesting read. I think one of the longest chapters in here was the guy literally talking about the entirety of the last 1,500 years of Chinese history and the dynasties that came and fell and how each and every one of them used fiat currency poorly. So that's why I said at the beginning, this is 500 pages on a man waxing and waning about the price of tea in China.
Yep.
It's a great book if you like history.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a good book as far as where I would put this in relation to becoming more knowledgeable financially and also in the crypto space. It's not super high, but it does cover a lot of interesting topics. It's true. Alrighty, so folks, you guys can find me at Zenith DI on Instagram and Twitter. That is where I hang out a lot. Send me a message over there if you want to reach out, chat. And if you want some memes, I run a meme page called Hexco Space Force. Check that out over there. After this, we are going over to Discourse Syndicate to be on that stream as well. And then other than that, we will see you guys on Sunday for our usual show. And Pulse-Chain Conference is going on. So after Discourse Syndicate, we will be on hour 5 of streaming for our own panel to close out day 1 of the Pulse-Chain Conference. We're going to be on there with the captain himself, RG3, Access Alive, and I think Black Hexkin is also going to be joining us for that one. So it is going to be a star-studded panel. If you want to talk to those guys, ask questions to us or all of us together, we will be doing that. And I think as far as the tentative plan for what we have, I threw out the idea is that I want to do a bit of a recap of all the stuff that's gone down in Pulse Chain so far and all the stuff yet to come. Because after all, we're celebrating a birthday over there. Pulse Chain has been out for a year on Monday, so it's definitely something to celebrate. That is what we got going on over here. I want to say thank you so much for spending time with us. I know this is a thick and dense book for book club, but we appreciate everyone that showed up, contributed, and also shared your thoughts on the thing. I appreciate you guys a lot. And until we see you guys next time, I want you to
Feliz Dia de las Madres.
degen responsibly.